Sage Wanderer here, and welcome to Story Time with Uncle Sage. The time I met John Wayne's horse. Dum dum dum. So, how do you meet John Wayne's horse without meeting John Wayne? Well, I have a great little story that you may have heard. It's been told around. It is a factual, historical fact that while John Wayne was dying of cancer in a California hospital, he was living a kind of isolated life towards the end. And he didn't get a lot of visitors, and mainly he had security and doctors and nurses. And there was a young woman who was part of what you might call the hippie movement or the Jesus freak movement. She was a hippie Christian lady, young woman. I think at the time she was probably around 20, 21. And she got it in her mind that she needed to make sure that if John Wayne was going to die, that he knew Jesus. And she became obsessed with getting access to John Wayne so that she could witness to him. And so she actually tried various methods to break into the hospital. She was caught several times and ejected. At one point, I think she was detained or maybe even arrested, and but she just wouldn't give up. And one day, she managed to climb up a drain pipe and get up to John Wayne's hospital room, I think on the third floor, and was able to climb in his window. And she climbed in his window and immediately started telling him about Jesus and how that she wanted to make sure that he was saved and knew Jesus. And of course, the security come piling in and they're ready to arrest her and have her hauled off for being a nut. And John Wayne, on his deathbed, sick in bed, stops them because John Wayne appreciated her inner fortitude. He knew the what she went through to get up the side of that building and in his window just to talk to him. And so he stopped his security from kicking her out and he let her speak her piece. And after she was done basically presenting him with the gospel, he kind of smiles and chuckles and says, "Well, honey, I know Jesus already, but thank you for going to that extra mile to ensure that I was going to go out of this world correct and go out this world right. And I really appreciate that." And one thing you'll know about John Wayne is that he had an affinity for strong-willed, tough women, and his characters and the women that he worked with in Hollywood reflected that. His on-screen back and forth with Katharine Hepburn in Rooster Cogburn is absolutely legendary. Um, John Wayne starred in several movies with Maureen O'Hara, who always played a strong-willed, fiery, red-headed Irishwoman. And so he kind of had a thing for strong women. Strong men like strong women. I know I like strong women. The woman in my life right now is very strong and capable and determined and tough, strong-willed. And so I can relate. But John Wayne saw this in this little girl. To him would be a little girl, a little 20-something, Spitfire who climbed up the drain pipe to get in his room. And he let her hang around and they became friends. And he gave her access into the door so she didn't have to come in and out through the window. And she started visiting John Wayne in the twilight of his life in the hospital while he was dying of cancer. And their friendship grew. And of course, it was like a father daughter type of friendship. And it was definitely Christian based and oriented. And of course, she was good company for him as well as helping him strengthen his beliefs and deepen his faith at the end of his life. And their friendship grew to the point where John Wayne put her in his will. And so this woman, when John Wayne dies, is told by a lawyer, is contacted by a lawyer, that she had made it into John Wayne's will, which had nothing to do with why she was doing what she was doing. All of it was very much from a point of goodness. Like, she was not a gold digger. She wasn't trying to get access to a star for any other reason than she felt like she needed to talk to him about Jesus. And so she was shocked to discover that he had put her in her will. And he had left her a piece of property in the state of Oregon. This is how I bumped into her. Many of you know I was raised in Oregon, and my dad was a preacher there. So when John Wayne was in the movie Rooster Cogburn, there's a final scene in the movie where he's saying goodbye to Katharine Hepburn and they part company. And it's kind of one of those classic Western endings, where he kisses the girl and rides off into the sunset. Although I don't think they kissed in that movie, but there was definitely this feeling of affinity between him and this godly woman in the movie, Rooster Cogburn. And in that scene, they're sitting in this beautiful, pristine valley, and there's a stream running through the middle of it. And at the end of that scene, and the movie's wrapped and they're done, John Wayne just sits back and looks around in that moment while shooting Rooster Cogburn. And he says, I really love this little valley. This little place here that we've been shooting the last few scenes in this movie in is beautiful. And so he told his assistant, would you just buy this whole valley? So when John Wayne finished the Rooster Cogburn movie, he bought the valley, which included a small kind of ghost town that had a couple of struggling businesses in it, mainly a truck stop. At one time, the little town there, right on I-5, would have been a little bit of it was either a mining town or it might have been it was a boom town of some sort that just kind of ceased to exist around the 1950s or 60s. And all that was left by the time that John Wayne bought the place was a lot of empty buildings, including a school that was shut down, a couple of churches that were shut down, several homes, and the truck stop, gas station. At one time, it had a post office that had been shut down. At one time, this had been an incorporated Oregon City. But by the time that it was a ghost town, by the time John Wayne bought it and the thousands of acres surrounding it in this valley in the top of the Oregon mountains, right along I-5 on the pass leading up to Roseburg. So this exit is one of those exits on that stretch that's really remote, and it's kind of the last place to get gas, right? So this woman inherited this from John Wayne. He gave her the valley, he gave her the whole little town, and he gave her his horse. He gave this woman his horse, the horse from all of the last half of his career, the last part of his career. So John Wayne typically rode the same horse, and I used to know the horse's name, and this is a long time ago. I was about 15 when I met this woman, and John Wayne had been dead for some time. And the way I met her is that she had this town that she owned, and she had this empty church, and she had a dream of revigorating the town and making it a Christian community. And she was a person that believed that they were in the end times back then in the 80s. And she believed that God had given her that land to create this kind of survivalist community. And she had approached my dad through a mutual friend, and he was between churches, and she invited us up for the day to the little town she owned to talk about reinvigorating, remodeling, and re-equipping the church there and starting a church. And her main thing was that the truck stop tended to, the little Greasy Spoon restaurant, convenience store, gas station, it was the only really working business in that town. She ran that with her son, and they ran it single-handedly. She pretty much ran it by herself. So she'd take your order, cook for you, bring it out to the table, take your money, the whole 9 yards. And she told several harrowing stories of being overrun by bikers or carloads of hoods who realized that she was so remote and there was no police and nobody but her. And but she used her faith in Jesus to get through that. My dad was a gun guy, so he was telling her, you should get a gun. You need to learn how to shoot. And she was a pacifist. And she was like, no, God will protect me. God will protect me. And I wish I knew what happened to her. And maybe if you guys are super curious, you can research this because it's a pretty well-known story. And I wish I remembered the name of the town, but you might find it by Googling John Wayne's horse, because he did give her the horse. I did get to meet John Wayne's horse. I fed him an apple, and I got to pet him. I did not ride him because by the time I met her, he was getting kind of old. He was pretty old. But she cherished that horse, and John Wayne thought so much of her that he gave her the land to keep the horse on and the horse. And, of course, he had many real estate holdings. That was just one of many. But I found it really interesting that he wrote her into his will because she was a late life, at the very end of his life, friend. She did the Jesus thing, He was sick in the hospital, and she visited him. And I would like to say this. My channel has been under a lot of Christian scrutiny because I have this unorthodox way that I reach people. And I go out in the world where they are, and I infiltrate their circle, and I get to know them that way. And I don't do what other Christians do and set up shop in a church and hold my hand out going, all the sinners come. All the sinners, they're not coming. This is why the church is dying. The sinners aren't coming. You have to take a page from this woman's book. Not that John Wayne was a sinner, but you have to take a page from this woman's book and be ready to climb up a drain pipe to get to somebody and tell them about Jesus. You know, when Jesus was on this earth, the sick people worked so hard to get to him that they would break into the roof of a house and lower themselves down on a rope just to get into the room where Jesus was at. They'd tear in through the roof to get to him. And, you know, that kind of passion, that kind of spiritual passion in both directions just doesn't exist today. And I encourage you as Christians, if you are believers, that you stop being pacifists and that you stop being, I shouldn't say pacifist, stop being passive and start getting aggressive about going out into the world and reaching people that need to be reached, even if you have to climb up a drain pipe to do it. And although I feel like, and John Wayne assured her that his soul was already belonged to Jesus, and he knew where he was going. At the same time, he needed ministry. He didn't have friends like you think. I mean, famous people are the most lonely because the people around them are handlers and employees, and in his case, doctors and security guards. And you know, John Wayne, I'm not throwing his kids under the bus. They were there, visiting him. She talked about meeting them. They were around. But this woman's commitment level to ministering to people was so strong that she was willing to break all the rules to make a new friend and to make sure that they were right with God. And so, as kooky as the story is, and I met the lady, and she was beautifully, wonderfully kooky. And she had great big dreams. And I would drive past the town. My dad declined the offer, and it was just too much for him to take on. It was too much of a mission. It was later in life for him. You know, he was my age, and we ended up going a different direction, and he ended up taking another church further south down in the Medford area. But at any rate, I encourage you all to have that kind of boldness. And maybe you'll get to meet John Wayne's horse too. Who knows? But I thought you'd appreciate that. Research that. It's a true thing. I did get to visit the lady and be in the town and walk through the old Victorian era church. And we kind of had the run of the ghost town. It's kind of neat as a 15-year-old. I thought that was pretty awesome. Not to mention that lady was really pretty, and I kind of had a crush on her. I wanted to move to that town, even though there wasn't anybody else there. That's the whole thing. It would have been us and her. She hoped if we built it, people would come. But there was nobody living in that valley. After John Wayne bought it, I guess a lot of people moved away, the few that were there. But I never saw the town take off, although the truck stop is probably still there to this day. And her son may still be running it. I don't know. If you're at the last chance for gas, somewhere between Roseburg and Salem, you'll run in Roseburg and Eugene, rather. You'll definitely see that exit. It's right at the top of the hill. All right, we'll see you next time and on Story Time with Uncle Sage. Yes, I don't know what's going on here.